Eruvin Daf. Today's email comes to us from Moshe Zaret, who just made Aliyah from Highland Park 5 days ago. And he says, the main reason why he chose to make Aliyah and come to this neighborhood is because he visited MDYB Smedrish and he loved it so much that he decided and he cemented the deal. So we wish you tremendous amount of atzlacha in your new move. Eruvin Chavdal discusses Karfaf, an enclosed area. There's a residential enclosed area. There's a non-residential. We're discussing right now a case where it was enclosed for a residential area, and it's more than 2 sa. What happens if he plants, let's say, vegetables? Once you plant vegetables, you cannot walk on it any longer. So it depends. If you planted more than 2 sa, according to everybody, the entire karfaf becomes usr. Even the area that's unplanted becomes usr because it's open to the planted area. If you planted exactly 2 sa, and it's the majority of the entire karfaf, even Rabbi Shimon holds that it's usr. Rabbi Shimon argues on Chachamim when he says that it's mutter to go from one domain to another, from one rishus to the other, from a gag, from a rooftop to a chatzar, from a chatzar to a karfaf. Chacham say you can't. He says that you could, but over here he'll agree that the miyot, the part that you didn't plant, is mitzdarif to the roiv, the part that you planted. If you planted the lesser part of your karfaf, the miyot, if it's less than 2 sa, according to everybody, you're permitted to carry in the karfaf. The machlokes lays, what if you planted exactly 2 sa? According to Reb Shimon, the karfaf is mutter to carry in. You're allowed to carry in the planted part, you're allowed to carry in the non-planted part, and you're allowed to go from one to the other. Therefore, there is nothing to aser one from the other. According to Chachamim, although if you just planted less than 2 or exactly 2 sa and you fenced it in, you'd be permitted to carry in that area. But since you cannot carry from the planted area to the non-planted area, because Chacham hold you can't go from one rishus to the other, that makes it iser to the entire karfaf. What if you planted trees? Now trees, it's normal to walk between trees, so it doesn't do anything to your karfaf, and therefore it has a halacha of a chatzar, and the entire karfaf is mutter. However, there's machlokes if you planted trees that are not in a perfect line. Do people use them like that or not? We paskin, the Gemara says, Rav Huna bar Yehuda paskin halacha lamaisa in his town, like Rav Nachman, that it's mutter. A karfaf that was designed and built not for residential use, there's no way to switch the name and make it into residential use unless you take drastic action. Unless you break the wall, you start all over, or you break more than 10 amos of the wall and repair that the entrance, that hole, is less than 10 amos. If you do so and you repair it with the intent to make it a karfaf that's residential use, it turns into residential use. The Gemara says an amazing chiddush. What if you don't break 10 amos? You just break 1 amma and repair it. Break another amma, repair it. Do that a little bit more than 10 times. The halacha is, it's as if you broke the entire 10 amma in one shot, and you could start all over again. We find a very similar halacha. When you have a kli, and it has a hole the size of an olive, you can repair it. The tumor remains in the kli. You keep on repairing until you get to the size of a pomegranate. The Gemara tells us, however, that if you had small holes the size of an olive, a few of them, that all of them together add up to a pomegranate, even though they weren't there together the size of a pomegranate, by the time you got to one hole, you fixed the other hole, the tum is removed. The same applies to a shoe, a sandal, that a zav steps in, it's tummy tumas medris. If one of the iznayim in red became detached, and you repaired it, the tumor remains. But if the second one comes detached, then we parim chadashis bolakan, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan says, and it's as if both of them were off and the tumah dissipates. The Gemara tells us that Chizkiah loved this pshat that Rabbi Yochanan just said, and he said on him, this person is not even human. Les Dain Barnash, he's not even human, he's unbelievable. Or some say that he said, this is a human being. This is what it's supposed to look like. Rav Kahana says that if you have a backlot behind the houses, it has a halacha of a karmelis, and just like a Rosh Hashanah, you could carry 4 amos midoraisa, so too in this karmelis you could carry up to 2 amos. So Rav Nachman says that's dafka if there was a doorway and he built the back lot around the doorway. In the chidushes, even though that back lot has some sort of processing facility for his wheat, a beit dare, there's a factory over there, and that's why he made that door. Nevertheless, you can consider it a residential use, and it's mutter to carry there. What if this karfaf that was fenced in for residential use, but it filled up with water, it looks like a swimming pool? According to Rava, it has halacha as if you planted trees, and Amemer says that's only if the water is drinkable and usable, and therefore it has residential use. Rav Ashi says he thought to begin with that if the water was so deep, it was 10 tfachim, and that deep end had 2 saw worth, you can't carry there. And they said, no, why is that any different? Why is water different than a pile of fruit in the middle of your karfaf, which doesn't ruin anything? The Gemara tells us a very interesting case. You have a backlot. The backlot you cannot carry in. One end of the backlot goes to Rosh Hashanah through a mavli. The other end of the backlot goes into the river through a pathway. The river has a nice drop, a steep 10 tfachim drop, and therefore is considered a mechitza. How can we get to use the rechava, to carry in the rechava in the backlot, without breaking any walls? There are a number of options. Option number 1 is to put a tzuras HaPesach, something that looks like a door jamb, at the entrance, in pink, at the entrance of the pathway called Shvil HaKramim. It's a pathway that goes right through the vineyard. Abai says that's not a good idea because the camels come to drink. This is a true story that happened. Camels come to drink and they're going to knock down the tzuras HaPesach. But you can put a lechi. You put a small lechi. Lechi could be even as thin as a paper, 10 tefachim high. The camels won't rub it off. Says Rava, that's not a very good idea because people that see that won't notice that there's a mechitza in the river. And that's your third wall over there. They're going to think that 2 walls of the shvil, of this pathway, and a little lechi works. Now what about adding a mechitza to the river? You can't do that because you can't put one mechitza on top of another mechitza. Says Rava, finally, we put a lechi at the entrance of the mavi. And the lechi works well to seal off the mavi. The other end of the mavi that's closest to Rosh Hashanah has a tzuras HaPesach. This, the first end, closest to the rechava, to the backlot, has a lechi. Together you can carry in the mavi. Once you can carry in the mavi, it works for the mavi. It's going to work for the rechava, for the backlot as well. You're permitted to carry in the mavi, and you're permitted to carry in the backlot. There's a machlokes, however, if you're permitted to carry from the backlot into the mavi, and from the mavi into the backlot. Some want to say that since the backlot is not where people live, you don't have to make an eruv for it, and therefore there's no concern. And some want to say that since people might use the backlot, and therefore will necessitate an eruv, and people will forget, therefore there were guys and they said you cannot use the backlot, you can't carry from the mavi to the backlot. Have a wonderful day.